Hey everybody, my name is Kofi Kankam. I'm one of the co-founders of MidAdvantage. Today we're going to talk about how to get past those tricky interviews and the types of interview questions and styles that you might be asked. Those of you that applied round one right now are probably being notified currently, or you've just been notified or you're about to be notified whether or not you made it to the next round. Obviously, interviews are really important. I would say that as a former interviewer for both Harvard College and for Wharton MBA, I would say that it's probably an opportunity. It's probably can hurt you more than it can help you, but it certainly is an opportunity for you to sort of stand up from the pack. And most interviewers who are experienced try to ask difficult questions in order to separate sort of the amateurs from the pros. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. By the way, it is November 11th, Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day, all the veterans out there. Thank you for your service, and let's jump into it. So initially I'm going to speak about the company just a little bit, give you guys just a feeling that I know what I'm talking about, and then we'll jump into specific interview strategies and next steps. You'll note that our good friends at Beat the GMAT and us, we've muted you just so there isn't any feedback. If you have pressing questions that cannot wait until the end, feel free to type in those questions. Otherwise, just sit tight and we'll get to all the questions that we can on the back, and we're basically going to run this until for the hour, okay, until about 2 p.m. So MidAdvantage basically works with MBA candidates applying around the world. So we typically work with people in about 12 to 15 countries around the world. We are really focused on structure and process. We believe in it. We think that it's really important to be able to differentiate yourself from other candidates if you're applying from a place where there are a lot of people who typically submit applications, i.e. like a consulting company or a bank. And on the other end of the spectrum, if you're applying from a company, an organization that doesn't send a lot of people to business school, it's really important that you indicate the skills you've picked up and you indicate sort of what in your background is going to make you a good candidate. So both ends of the spectrum in between need that structure, we believe. We've been very fortunate to have really top-level consultants who are alums of great schools and who are great people and like working with other people, and who have a lot of diversity. So diversity is really important in the context of careers. I mean, obviously there's other kind of diversity, which is important too, but we know that a lot of you are coming from different areas, and we want to make sure that we've got those areas represented in the backgrounds of our consultants, as well as where you're looking to go, where you aspire to be after school in the short term and long term. And so we've got people in different areas of finance and marketing, government, tech, consulting, entrepreneurship, et cetera, real estate. We've got those angles covered. There are 3 core tenets in our company, which are literally on our walls, that we try to adhere to and make sure are woven into the fabric of the company itself. Experience is one. All of our people have gone to top-tier schools. We've all been in your shoes. Like, we know what it's like to be sitting in the fall and kind of checking your email every day and trying to get a refresh and see what your status is. We've also been on the other side of the table as second-year interviewers, alumni interviewers, and people who have worked directly in admissions. So we've been involved in those decisions, and we know kind of what schools look for. We are very client-focused. We believe in it. We think it's really important to make our clients feel comfortable, and it's a very stressful time for a lot of you, and we get that, and so we try to be there as much as we can and build that kind of strong relationship, which typically lasts longer than just the engagement and goes, we've had clients now that are friends for 7 years, and performance. So all of our people, our clients, we want getting into great schools, and really, like pretty much most/all of them really do go to really, really good schools or excellent schools. And we've had people literally on these campuses right now, all of these campuses represented below, and this is actually not a comprehensive list, okay? I'm Kofi. Those of you on Beat the GMAT hopefully know me. I'm there. I try to be there every day, but essentially I'm one of the founders. Eric and I both worked at Accenture. In separate cities. I sold a software company after business school. Eric did it before business school. Eric also worked at GE Capital. My background is in, I did my undergrad degree at Harvard College. I have a master's in education from there. I have an MBA from the Wharton School, where I served as a Joseph Wharton Fellow, which entitled me to some money, which was great. And I also ran Wharton's largest student-run conference, the Whitney Young Conference, and I was a marketing teaching assistant for a first-year required class. Eric, went to Brown undergrad, did really well at Wharton, and actually had a full ride as well. So we're the two founders. We have a really great team behind us who are typically smarter than us, as we've stereotypically smarter than us, as we've tried to do. But we have like a really great team that's got strong, diverse background. As mentioned, you can see some of them on here to the bottom right, and you can look up the rest online. All right, and that's that. Let's get to the interview types and strategies. Okay, so people always ask, why does interview matter, right? Like, I wrote my essays, I have my recommendations, maybe I'm not good in person. You know, I heard the interview doesn't matter that much. It doesn't matter. The reality is the admissions committee members, if you look at business school applications over the last 6 to 8 years, you'll see that the number of essays and the essay word length per essay has actually gone down. And so you literally have probably about 30 to 50% less of an opportunity to sort of express your story prior to the interview, which I actually don't like, but it is what it is. And so the interview then becomes a little bit more important, creates a real opportunity for you in some respects to go over and bring in new stuff that you didn't get a chance to mention in your application. Before, that wasn't the case. Before, you had 5 or 6 essays. Like Harvard Business School used to be 6 essays. And by the time you got to interview, you kind of written everything that you want to talk about. It's really not the case anymore, specifically with Harvard, with other schools, okay? There also is the drink test in terms of why it matters. So the application is one piece of the puzzle, right? But you have to understand, like, most schools are looking at you in the context of, can this person operate in a good team? Even in our company where Eric and I run it, we have a team of 30, 40 people, including our consultants, and we're just some team members, right? So people have better ideas. We have to accept them. We try to create an environment where everyone wants to contribute. And so the admissions committee members want to know if you're going to be a good person to work with. Are you going to be a good teammate? Are you going to pass the infamous Cleveland, airport test, which is offensive to those of us from Cleveland, but it is a real term. They want to make sure that you can fit in, because in this world, professionally, there are very few people that are doing it alone. And so it's very hard for the admissions committee members to get a feel for whether or not you're going to be a great team member and able to exist in that environment, thrive, and motivate your teammates, whether they're employees or they're senior level people. They can't do that unless they sort of meet you in person, okay? And then the other thing is, business school has become so popular. I mean, you look at TV shows like that Don Cheadle show, I can't remember the name of the show, but it's become what law school used to be 20 to 30 years ago. Well, now there's so many people applying to business school generally that the schools have a little bit of an issue where 70% of the people that apply are qualified and admissible, okay? And so, if you took a pool of 20 people, 6 would have no chance, 14 would be very good. Of that 14, if you're looking at top 20 or 30 schools, you're looking at 2 to basically 6 getting in. And so the interviews are a great way for you to differentiate yourself and for the schools to see that differentiation. It's a great way for the candidates of the schools to basically look and say, okay, this is someone who actually is a weak applicant who just had a really good application. Could happen in a number of different ways. They want to determine, again, who's personable, and they want to sort of see the intangibles, like, does this person have leadership? Do they have presence? Do they have a great way to communicate? Those things don't jump off the page when you're reviewing someone's essays and letters of recommendation or resumes. So you need to meet them in person. It's really important that you know your value and direction, okay? And so we need a lot of candidates who want to go to school but don't really have a very good feel for what they bring to the table. So I'll ask them, tell me about, 3 to 5 character traits you think that are really relevant that you have that are significant for business school. And they can't do that, right? You really need to go beyond sort of just saying, I want to go to school in order to have a better career, and I want to go to school in order to take all these things, to I want to go to school, and here's what I bring to the table. Here are the leadership characteristics. I'm innovative. I'm a great communicator. I'm civically or community-minded. I'm analytical. I've got, I'm able to lead without authority. And you want to support those with examples, okay? From a, academic, I'd say personal, community, and professional perspective. You want to know that going into your interview, just like you wanted to have that information when you started putting together your applications. And you really should be thinking about, you should be prepared for them to ask you a question about, tell me about a time when you demonstrated perseverance or leadership, or, you overcame a conflict, or you, snatched success from, the jaws of defeat. right? You should be going in having an idea of what you would talk about in these particular instances, okay? It's also exceptionally important, as I alluded to know why you're going to school. Now, this used to be a question, why you're going to school, why you're going now, and why you're going, to this particular university, or why you're seeking entry in this particular university. These areas of questions used to be something that was asked of you in your actual essays, and now it's not. But you need to be prepared to answer in the interview, because this is something interviewers love asking. I loved asking it. Most interviewers love asking it. And they want to know also about your short-term and long-term goals. They want to know, and they may ask you directly, but they definitely want to walk out knowing this, what your campus contribution is going to be, how you're going to make a contribution from academic, extracurricular, and personal and professional perspective. And they want to know, are you going to be involved as an alum? Are you going to be someone that, hires people, someone that gives money to the school, someone that comes back and speaks at different conferences and speaker series, or are you going to be someone that just takes from the school, does your 2 years, and they never hear from you again? And that's very, very important to schools. In terms of preparing, and this is infamous Al Iverson, I actually ran into probably about 3 or 4 times when I was in Philadelphia at Wharton, but I love AI actually, but it is about practice, okay? It is about practice and practice and practice. So you need to be prepared. Those of you that are good interviewers or interviewees sometimes don't realize this is a bit of a different interview than your work interview, okay? So if you're not doing this already, you need to do things like read the Journal, the Wall Street Journal, read the Financial Times daily, okay? You should have an elevator pitch, i.e., if I was riding an elevator with you from, the bottom floor to the 10th floor, and I told you, tell me about yourself and impress me, you need to have that pitch, right? The 15 to 20 second, here's what I'm about, here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm here, here's how I'm going to be a dominant player in your school, right? Be prepared for a variety of behavioral questions. Now, most interviewers want to get to the how and the why, not the what. They want to know why you did something. They want to know how you did something. They don't necessarily need to know what you did. So you need to be prepared to discuss those things. If you were someone that's very binary and said, I made the decision because it was the right thing to do, you're not going to do well in the interview unless you change your style a little bit. Okay? Be prepared for school-specific questions beyond why do you want to go to our specific school to what do you know about the Entrepreneurial Center? Why did you pursue Lauder versus the Kennedy School? What are some professors that you want to study? What do you think about this professor? You say you're interested in the, CSR. That Professor Smith basically just wrote an article on corporate social responsibility that was in the Journal yesterday. Did you read it? What did you think about it? Okay? You need to be informed about these things, right? Practice anytime you can. Practice in the shower. I mean, it sounds hokey, but that's the time when you're probably relaxed. You're alone. Those of you who live in apartments, it's probably the only place you're sort of not bothered by somebody else. We joke around, but just practice, okay? And definitely record it if you can. See what your tendencies are, see how your handles are, see what your body posture, head placement looks like, and pay attention specifically to pace as well as tone, in addition to sort of your body language. There are different kinds of interview formats, and you need to be prepared to make adjustments, especially those who are applying to different kinds of schools. One interview practice or one interview style is not probably going to be enough to prepare you for all the different interviews you're doing. So if you're doing alumni interviews, one thing you want to keep in mind is those of us who interview as alums, we don't know what's going on, okay? So we haven't read your essays. We've looked at your resume. Most of us probably looked at your resume 15 to 20 minutes before you walked in the door. And we've got other things going on professionally. We're working. This is the most important day of the year for you. One of probably the top 5. For us, it's just another day, right? And it's a day where, to be honest with you, a lot of us are thinking, God, why did I volunteer to be an alumni interviewer? I've got so much to do this day. So make it easy for us, okay? Go to them if you can. Be be flexible with your timing. Follow the lead with their vibe. You'll meet some interviews. I interviewed with a British guy when I interviewed at Columbia, and he's sort of stereotypically pretty reserved, and I was pretty gregarious, and it kind of hit me. I needed to sort of take a step back. And I had some of the opposite interviews, days I was tired, and I basically came in and the person was really chatty. I thought it was like on a talk show. You need to be prepared to sort of match their energy. And part of it's dictated by where you interview physically as well. Are you in a coffee shop? Are you in an office? are you in their apartment, etc. Okay? Make sure you give them a chance to speak about their experiences, ask them questions about their experiences. Most alumni interviewers interview because they love the school. And they love the school because they had great experiences and they want to talk about those experiences, okay? So create a path where they can do that by asking questions about their own experience and maybe try to dovetail some of what you've done with that, right? Campus interviews, a little bit different. I actually would recommend, if you have the option to do an alumni interview or a campus interview, I recommend you do a campus interview because I think it shows interest in the school. I think it gives you something different to talk about when you come in, especially when you do an interview. Like I recommend sort of doing an afternoon interview or interview in the late morning. You can go to a class and then come out and say, oh, I was in this class, I saw this. It just gives you a way to sort of initialize or initiate the conversation, so to speak, and that can be quite helpful, right? Get a feel for the campus and get there early, as I mentioned. Try to talk to students on campus. You know, you have to think about the fact that you actually may get accepted. And if you're applying to multiple schools, you probably are going to have to make a choice. And most of you that apply to multiple schools in tiers where, you know, you can be successful. No, you won't be making a bad choice to choose Columbia over Chicago, right? So, you know, this may be the only time you visit, so do talk to students. Don't worry about sort of comparing yourself to others. It's hard to do. By the way, that's both from a personal perspective in terms of being in the interview room and looking around, you know, as you wait to be called in, and as well as when you're actually doing the interview with the interviewer. Don't feel the need to compare yourself and sort of compare and contrast, almost like you're a politician saying, I'm better than that person. Don't do that, okay? Pay attention to your nerves, right? So, and what I mean by that is, you know, I tend to be someone, I get a little anxious, so, and I would always get hot, so, you know, I bought some very, very light suits, right? Because I don't want to wear like a hot cotton or wool suit. So, you know, pay attention to your nerves. If you know, if you're clammy hands, you know, make sure you're obviously, you know, you wipe your hands before you go in. Just relax, okay? Generally, phone and Skype interviews, be aware of distractions. It's very easy to get distracted. I've interviewed people, and I could tell they're distracted because I heard something in the background or they asked me to repeat a question. Just make sure you're in a space where you can totally pay attention. Bring energy. Those of you who are somewhat more muted in your personalities will be challenged by a phone or Skype interview because you don't have that natural energy and passion, and it's very hard as an interviewer to recognize that over the phone or in a non-direct person-to-person interaction, okay? And make sure you dress appropriately. Just because you're not there in person doesn't mean you should be dressed, you know, inappropriately. But obviously, you know, you're not doing a standing interview, so if you want to wear shorts, you know, underneath a blouse and a jacket, or a shirt and tie and jacket, that's fine. But like the part that the interviewer sees needs to be, you know, needs to be professional. Okay. In terms of like, you know, additional tips, it's really important that you know your story. Okay. So again, a crisp 1 to 2 minutes. Do your research. Now, know the school. Know why you're interested in the school. The reason why you may love Wharton may be different than the reason I loved Wharton. And that's okay as long as you've got valid reasons beyond, I saw that it was ranked #1, you know, in X, Y, and Z poll. That's not a good reason to go to the school alone. You could say, look, part of the fact that it's competitive and it's one of the top tier schools, you know, where I can meet really impressive people, that's motivating. But there's got to be something else there behind that. Okay, and this day and age, with the era of LinkedIn, you also can know your interviewer. Now, don't be creepy, right, and know everything about them, but know what you're getting into. Know kind of the activities they did, because one, you might be able to bring it up openly with them, or two, you might be able to sort of, you know, push a certain level of discussion towards, you know, what they've done and give them a chance to talk, as I mentioned on a previous slide. So it'll also make you feel more comfortable, more prepared, and they probably have done their research on you, right? Clearly have some information because they have your resume, but they may have linked you up on LinkedIn. It'll make you feel probably a little bit better to have a little bit of background on them, okay? Make sure you are structured. So, you know, when you ask a question like, give me the 3 reasons why you want to be at our school, don't say, you know, reason 1, blank, 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 reason 2, blank, 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 reason 3, blank, 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 blank. So, you know, the 3 principal reasons why I want to go to your school, those are, you know, you're really a strong alumni network, the fact that you've got great training, and the fact that, you know, you've got exceptional credibility in my field of interest in marketing. So if I get to your alumni network, point 1, and then go through it. So give me sort of an overarching topic sentence if you can. If you practice and practice a lot, you'll find it much easier to do that, right? And try to schedule your interview earlier than, say, 4 or 5 p.m., like, because people get tired. Sometimes you'll have to cancel, whether you're on campus or not, okay? The day of the interview, get there early, right? Your interviews are usually going to be about 35 to 45 minutes. Usually half an hour, but they usually go a little bit above that. Use your time well. Be comfortable. But not so comfortable. Like, if you're an internet entrepreneur, don't go in jeans and a blazer. That's not enough. Like, dress professionally, but, if you don't wear pearls and your pearls, are going to affect you, or you don't wear, you don't do double Windsor knot ties. Like, don't do those things on the day of your interview. Make sure you feel comfortable, okay? Energy, and the last thing I really want to mention here is it's really important to have questions. The whole time you're sitting in front of an interviewer isn't a validated period for you, and I can't tell you how many times I was sort of turned off by people who didn't have any questions when I said, okay, tell me your questions, and they had nothing to ask me. That showed me that they either weren't into my school, they didn't find the interview engaging, or they were so pompous that they kind of knew everything about the place, or they didn't value my time. And maybe some of that was a little bit, I think probably interviewers probably take it too personally at times, but those are the kinds of things they think. So make sure that you're coming with questions. It's totally cool to type your question. Have a set of questions typed up rather, and when I say, do you have questions? Yes, I do have questions, and bring out that sheet. You don't have to memorize it. And, say, okay, we answered this one, check. Let me ask you this one. We answered this one, check. That shows a lot of preparation, and it's really sort of subtle signals that make people feel good, interviewers feel good. I mean, most of you, if you're getting an interview, you're smart enough to be at the school, okay? That's all. You're trying to communicate passion for the school, passion for the program, tremendous belief in yourself, a desire to basically contribute, and all the things where people say, we can't afford to let this person go. She is a stud, and if we let her go to another school, we're going to regret that. You're trying to convey those things, so make sure you're acting the part, okay? In the last couple of years, there have been different kinds of interview formats which have come. It used to be purely one-to-one. The last couple of years, my alma mater was one of the ones that did it, but you saw group interviews, right? And so this is really getting to the teamwork aspect of being a business school candidate when you're on campus and working in a learning team, as well as being a professional. If you do a group interview, be personal. Now, if you are a jerk and you're someone that bulldozes people, muzzle it, okay? Don't be that person. If you're a talker, tone down a little bit. If you're reserved and quiet, speak up. It's when I had a classmate that was a really smart guy, was in a company, and he went to a meeting, and his boss was supposed to be there, and his boss couldn't make it, and my friend went, and he didn't say a word in the meeting just because he was trying to sort of, think and listen, and he kind of got reprimanded because he said nothing. And so, it happens to everyone. I mean, this is a good friend of mine from business school. Just keep in mind that they are looking, so you've got to be engaged, okay? Pull in your own experiences, be aware of your body language. And I think the last point on this is, try to be a facilitator. Try to make sure that you're not engaging in groupthink. Ask the quiet person, hey, John, what do you think? Hey, Cindy, you didn't mention anything at this point. What do you have to say to this? Be that kind of person that seems like you're valuing all of your team members. And that'll be quite beneficial to you in terms of the evaluation. Now, follow-up is pretty basic, but promptly thank the interviewer. That means, i.e., within the next 24 to 48 hours, they should get some kind of communication. I love personal notes. I think they're classy, and I think they're kind of a throwback to a previous time, but, an email's fine, okay? If you are going to write a personal note, a great way to do it is to, have stationery. If you interview on campus, basically, do a quick write-up before you leave and drop it in the mail in that city and then fly home, and that person will probably get it the next day, okay? When you do your follow-up, include items you spoke about. It'll jog the interviewer's memory, and it'll also make the interviewer think, this person was actually quite interested and engaged in what we talked about, as opposed to giving them a generic, great to meet you, I really enjoyed it, hope I get in. Tell them, hey, I really enjoyed hearing about your experience sort of, sailing, in the Charles River, or, I thought it was really interesting how you spoke about, advising local businesses, in the Austin, Texas area. Here's an article I wrote about business. Here's an article I read about business school consultants. I mean, go a little bit above and beyond and put a personal touch in there and make it seem like it's relevant and offer them something. I think an article is a really nice thing to do if you have one, at your fingertips. Okay. We obviously help people get ready for interviews, but that's not necessary if you feel you don't need it. But I did want to mention that. Okay. Next steps before we get to questions. So Admit Me, we've launched a new platform. It's free. We've heard a lot of you say, all this stuff is so expensive, admissions consultants, I can't afford it. What's in it for me? And to be honest with you, we historically were challenged with, okay, we've got these great consultants I spoke about, we got to pay them. But about a year ago, we thought about it and said, okay, we're going to try to do something. We basically put some time in over the last couple of months and released Admit Me. It's a beta, but basically it's a tools-based social network. You can meet other candidates, and you can, find alumni at your schools and kind of manage your application process. So tell us what you want to see on it, and we'll continue to do it. But hop on; it's totally free, and we'll talk and interact. That's a way to sort of level the admissions playing field. And if you register and tell 5 friends, we're pretty serious about really pushing this. We'll give you a 25% discount on our services. Right? So admit.me, check it out. If you insist on paying us money, which is totally fine, I'm joking around, but if you do want more extensive support, we offer a number of options. Hourly, we offer a final review package, basically streamlined, comprehensive. So if you have $250, you can get help. If you have $37.50, you can get a lot of help, unlimited help in a 1-school application package, $5,000 for 2 schools, $6,000 for 3 schools. But we've tried to have everything, especially with Admit Me. We try to have things in different price points. Obviously, if you pay more money, you get more help, right? We know most of you are going to business school personally to make more money, but we do want to do our part to help level the playing field, and so we have tried to be creative about it to the point where, for the comprehensive, streamlined, and final review, the payments are in increments if you need it to be, okay? So we have a lot of offerings. Take a look at our site, and you should find something and reach out to me if you have questions. Ding analysis, if you didn't get in last year, wondering what the heck happened, it was so good, I can't believe I didn't get in, and you want to make sure you don't make the same mistake, the ding analysis is for you, and you do get a half, basically half the price of it is a credit towards something else, and a pre-application package is for people, the opposite. If you're not applying this year, but you're applying next year or later, and you want to make sure that you're using your time well to prepare yourself to become the best possible candidate, the pre-application package is for you, okay? We've got many webinars coming up. You can look at our website. I won't read them to you. Jump on Admit Me. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and our blog. You guys see the discount code for the Princeton Review. Actually, it's out for our website. You see the discount code. I'm going to give you guys a 10% discount code, 1908. But again, it's 10%, 1908. If you jump on Admit Me and tell 5 friends, you get a 25% discount. So I think you guys know the math. And if you want help, reach out and sign up for a free consultation. You can email me directly, or you can email info@admitadvantage.com, okay, or call us, and we'd love to talk to you. Keep your chins up. I know you guys are in a tricky time. Let's take some questions. We'll keep you anonymous, and we'll try to answer as many as we can, all right? There's no question that's a bad question, so feel free to ask away. Okay, question 1. How do I feel about discussing personal topics during an interview? I think that's fine. I think it's got to be relevant, but I think it's fine. I think it's good, actually, to do that. I'll go a step further than that. I mean, personal shouldn't be, obviously it should be appropriate. It shouldn't be like anything, obviously, offensive in nature. Obviously anything dealing with race or sex, or potentially, be very careful about religion as well. But I think it's great to speak about your personal motivations to go to school, to get an MBA. Maybe you're doing it to help your family. Maybe you want to sort of solve an economic problem in maybe your home country or community. I think it's great to do that. And I think interviewers love seeing that. They love seeing the passion beyond, I just want to make more money. So that's totally okay, and I think it's great to do. Just be careful how you do it. Okay, another question. Regarding the, whoa, they're coming hot and heavy now. Okay. Regarding the follow-up post, to interview, typically the interviewer will probably mention his or her name when the interview starts. Can the follow-up email be sent to the General Admissions Committee email address? No, you should just send the follow-up to them directly, asking for their business card. Most interviewers will give you their business card, their contact information. You really should send it to them. You should not send it to the General Admissions. And if you can tell them at the end, like, look, can I have your card? I'd love to send you a thank you, and they'll give you their card information. So send it to them directly. Okay. When I said check the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, do you mean that we could get asked questions about business news? Yeah, I do. Especially if you are, well, firstly, look, you're going to business school, and so you should know what's going on, right? You should, even if you're not in business now, you should be showing a general interest in business. So, those are the two periodicals which are probably most comprehensive, at least read by sort of the business school community. So you should be reading that. I think secondly, they're going to see we will see your resume, and so if you're in a particular industry, we may ask you about that. Hey, you're in pharmaceuticals. What do you think about this deal that just went through, right? Or you work in sort of in internet technology. What do you think about Google buying Hopstop or Facebook buying WhatsApp? I mean, you should have an answer. You should be reading those things to get in practice. So yeah, you should be prepared. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to ask you something that's on page 4 or that's totally unrelated, but you should make sure that you're doing that because frankly, they may even ask you that just on the way into the sit down. Hey, did you see this article? It may not be a formal question, but if you seem like you're not interested in that at all, that's a problem. Okay. Okay, what do I think is the best way to break the ice in an interview? It's funny. That's a good question. I mean, interviewers are probably more accustomed to breaking the ice. They feel like that's more their job. But I think, you go into the interview, and I think you say, you're going to greet them and say, hey, thanks. I'm really excited to be here. That's enough, right? Thank you. I'm so excited about the opportunity. I'd love to answer any questions you may have about me. You could talk about how I flew in this morning. I got a chance. That's part of the reason why I like interviewing on campus, because you get a chance to say, I went through this amazing class by Professor Hawthorne where we talked about pricing strategies in emerging markets. It was phenomenal. I learned blank, blank, blank. I mean, I think those are the kinds of things that you should be thinking about. But typically your interviewer will be trying to break the ice with you because, they want to make sure that they're getting the real you and getting answers and you're talking, because they want to make sure you get a holistic evaluation. That's why the school interviews you. So, I don't know if it's ever happened, but I can imagine, if an interviewer speaks to a candidate, interviews a candidate, gets no information, has nothing to write about, they're going to be reprimanded by the school. Okay. Question, what types of questions can we ask the interviewer? Anything that you really want to know about the school. So how did, and later. So questions like, how has the degree been useful to you? Do you still stay in touch with classmates? What do you think about this new curriculum? I saw that you majored in finance. What did you learn that you're leveraging now? Do you still go back and participate in conferences? Those things of that nature. How do you rank your training versus other schools now at this point? So I think, but ask questions you want to know. I mean, obviously, don't ask inappropriate questions. How much money did you make coming out of school? You work in finance now. What's your bonus? Are you a millionaire? These are all questions that have been asked of me, by the way. So those are random questions. Don't ask those kinds of questions. But questions about their experience there, questions about their reaction to changes in curriculum or professors or administration. I think questions about how they're leveraging the degree now, or their experience with their degree and their classmates now, years out of school, I think are great. If you're interviewing on campus and speaking to an admissions officer, I think questions about how they think about composing their class are the best kinds of questions. Those are also the trickiest interviews because they're actually, most people that work on campus weren't students, so you can't really ask those kinds of student interviews. But you can ask them, what have you seen most students say? Hey, you're involved here, or do you see alums come back, or how involved are alums, or how do alums participate once they're gone? You can ask those kinds of questions, like basically take the first set of questions I mentioned and just kind of tweak them a little bit so you can get a proxy answer. Okay? The question for men, what suit colors do I recommend? Oh, we're getting nitty-gritty. Blue, black, gray. I would leave out gray. I'd leave out black. I'd probably say blue, gray, brown. I would say nothing, I'd say pinstripes are nothing obnoxious, like super wide stripes. You know, subtle, conservative, right? So I think blue, gray, um, browns, I think are good generally. Okay. Question, how much does work experience and the nature of work affect the interview process? Um, when you say affected, I mean, these are things that people will talk to you about. So, you know, when I would interview candidates, I had sort of different sections. I go through their backgrounds. I want to know their motivation for going to school. Then I pivot and ask questions about sort of their work experience, who inspired them, you know, what kinds of skills have they picked up, what are some of the greatest successes and failures, how do they manage from underneath them. I mean, that is definitely a topic. That's an area of inquiry that will be explored in an interview, and it could probably go anywhere from being 40% to being 80% of what you talk about. So that's going to be huge, a big piece. Okay. Okay. A question. Won't the interviewer feel that I'm being too desperate if I send him a follow-up email? I'm afraid I might look like a cheap tactic. No, you should always send a thank you email. That's actually considered to be standard form. If you do not send one, that's a problem. So always send a thank you. You're not asking them for anything more. You're not asking how did I do. You're saying a thank you for your time. I really enjoyed speaking to you about this. There's something you might be interested in. Okay, on average, how much time does it take to prepare an application for one school? It varies. You know, we've done with candidates, we've done 4 schools in 3.5 weeks. I would say typically for like most candidates, you've got 2 essays and you're working. I think probably your first school will probably take about 3 to 5 weeks, and each additional school about 2.5 weeks. Okay, how should one follow up with the interviews over Skype? Via email. Okay. Can you please give some good examples of good questions that could be asked during the interview to the interviewer? I think I answered that already. Questions about their background, questions about how they're leveraging their MBA, questions about how involved with the community they still are, questions about what they would have changed about their process, questions about things that surprised my campus, things of those nature. I think, look, I think you guys have, these are real questions, right? So you guys are asking me for a list of questions, but what questions do you want to know? Like, if you or I were sort of out at dinner and you were interested in applying to, you know, to Wharton, what questions would you want to know of me, right? What questions do you ask? I mean, those are the questions you should be asking. You probably should have some questions, right? Okay. During an interview, what areas do you focus the most on? Undergrad, career, personal life, future goals? Well, okay, so you are not dictating the interview, right? The interviewer is dictating the interview. So this question was about the way the question was worded, it was, you were asking sort of what should I focus on as an interviewee? You are going to be told what to focus on because there's going to be a line of questions. There are going to be areas that the interviewer wants to cover. So the interviewer is going to want to cover probably your intellectual aptitude, your communication skills, your real passion for the school, your professional success, and your ability to contribute. Some nature of those, some mix of those things, they will ask you the questions. And you basically, and your leadership obviously as well, and you'll respond. So don't worry about that. Just be about sort of what you're going to talk. Don't worry about sort of how you're going to emphasize things. Have coverage in all those areas. Have ideas of kind of what you'd like to speak about with regard to those areas I mentioned. Okay, I suppose it's bad to ask, why do you think your school dropped in the latest Business Week rankings? Yes, that's a good question. I appreciate you asking that here, but that is a bad question to ask. Don't ask that question. It's a good question, but it's a bad question to ask, right? So, and frankly, to be honest with you, most of the time, you can find that kind of information online. I mean, especially if you're reading one publication and you looked at they were ranked last year X and now X minus Y, they'll typically tell you why that happened. But you don't want to ask that questions, okay? Really. Unless you don't want to get in. I appreciate that though. Um, okay. Is Skype or phone interview the norm for international applicants, so they just stick to your application? No, typically, depending on where you are internationally, they may do like regional interviews. So, an admissions officer will fly to a specific city or a couple cities and then invite people to come see them. So obviously they'll give you enough notice, but typically they try to interview in person. Really the people that often do the Skype interviews are military people, but or people in very desolate regions, but School X, Michigan might fly to basically London, might fly to Lagos, and say, okay, people in these areas, or in the surrounding places, come see. I'm not going to ask you to fly overseas, but I'm going to ask you to fly to a neighboring country, right? So they'll typically ask you to do that. Question: are people in your reference letter contacted by the administration? Typically not. Typically not. If there's a question, they may. If you're one of the select few that they basically, whose applications they almost audit, right? They do select to do a background check. They probably would contact them in that sense to make sure you work there. But typically, they will not be contacted. Question: can I give more suggestions on the one group interview and the winning strategies to pursue? Not really. I mean, it's a little more nuanced, but not really. I would say come in with topic speaking points. You're going to get your general questionnaire pretty close to the interview. Always have backup points because someone could take your point, and you don't want to sort of, that's happened, right? You've been in the classroom, you've been trying to sort of make a point. The person, it's called right before you make the point, you get called and you have nothing to say. You can't be in that position. But I think, be a facilitator. You don't need to speak over people. Show you're a good teammate. Be responsive to people's points. So don't, sometimes when you argue with someone, they make a point and you make a different point that's not even really in response to that point. Don't be that person, okay? All right, another question. Being an IT engineer, what should I do differently to stand out among other candidates? That's a tough question to answer, man. I don't know anything about your background, but I would say probably indicating what your motivation is for school personally is a good place to stand out because someone won't be able to exactly mimic that. I think just speaking of your personal motivations is always the place you can differentiate in a way that you can. So with your other aspects of your background and or what you're looking to do professionally. I think your extracurriculars are also another place to differentiate yourself. Okay. Question: how is the interview evaluated in comparison to the components of the application process? It's important. I mean, it's obviously the last data point that you give, so I would say that it probably hurts you more than it helps you. I think your essays are probably first. Your letters of recommendation are probably, your letters of recommendation might be 2 and your interview might be 2A. Okay. Question: in my opinion, what is the best way for an applicant to make a lasting impression during an interview? I mean, that's a really open-ended question. I think just having a certain purpose. I think, one, speaking in a very clear manner, having very concise, targeted answers. I think being very passionate about why you're interested in the school. I think being very clear about what you're looking to bring to the table to impact your classmates. I think being very clear about management, what your management style is. Even if you haven't managed per se, that probably means you have been managed. So knowing how you want to lead and how you do lead, I think can be very helpful, right, in terms of leaving a great impression. Question: what would be perceived as a weakness during the interview? I think the opposite of what I just said. So, not being very clear about why you want to go to school, not being very clear about what you're bringing to the table, not being very clear about the leadership characteristics that you find valuable, that you think are really strong within you. Not being able to sort of have strong successes and sort of speak about things that have sort of really impacted you. I think those are the things which will look weak. Have some of our clients bombed their interview before? If so, why and how can we avoid doing the same? Yeah, I'm sure they have. I mean, everyone's bombed an interview. I think because of nerves. I think, people sometimes just lock up. They want to get a talking point out so much they don't answer the right question. You have to understand, I'm not in the interview with them, so I can't, they tell me they bombed. Some people have told me they bombed, have actually gotten in. Some have not gotten in. But I don't really necessarily know if it's because they quote-unquote bombed their interview, right? Because I wasn't there for that. I have to take it sort of secondhand. But yes, they have. I think if you hit the points I'm mentioning, you won't bomb, right? Okay. Question: regarding group interviews, how do I show that I'm competitive at the same time, not aggressive? you can be competitive with your idea and not be aggressive, right? So you can say, you can challenge someone's idea and say, okay, that was an interesting point, I think there's some merits in that point, but I look at it differently because I think the facts say blank, blank, and blank, so I probably would say I agree with this portion of it, but I don't agree with that portion. Here's why, right? It's all about your tone and showing respect for the other person, and respect also means addressing their point and not saying that's a stupid point and not seeing any merit in it or not even taking the time to say why you think it's a stupid point. Right? I think if you do that, you can contrast and be passionate, not be aggressive. It is a fine line to walk, but definitely can be done. Okay, another question. If it's a non-blind interview where they've got my full application form, what kind of questions would they ask? So basically you're saying if it's like with a current admissions officer and it's got the whole thing, they'll ask pretty much the same questions, okay? They might ask about, hey, so I noticed you had this discrepancy, you said that you're analytical, but I noticed you had a, you had a 3.1 GPA and your GMAT exam is a 720. What do you count that discrepancy to be based on? They might ask those kinds of questions. Typically ask the same kinds of questions. What the real difference is that you've got the opportunity, you've got to make a decision as to whether or not you bring in new stuff, new material, or if you, that's lovely, or if you just use the stuff that you already wrote about, right? So are you going to sort of use the same stories and experiences that were already in your application they've read, or are you going to sort of try to bring in something new that maybe didn't include? And typically you want to do a mix of both. Okay. If it's a non-blind interview where they've got my full application in front of them, what kind of questions would they have? Okay, sorry, just answer that one. Can we expect a reply to a post-interview thank you note? Does it reflect negative if I didn't get any response, or I don't get any response? No, yes, you can expect a reply, like, nice to meet you too. It'll be short. You're not going to get another question. They're not going to give you feedback on your interview. You should expect a reply. If you don't get one, I wouldn't say it reflects negatively on them, right? That's a little bit rude to not send that kind of email. So you should expect one. If you don't get one, I don't think it's necessarily an indication an interview wasn't good. It's probably just they're super busy and they have not made the time they should have made to respond to you. Okay, questions. Sometimes questions overlap, like tell me about the instance of leadership and tell me how you resolved a conflict. Do I tell the interviewer that my response to the second question was the same as the first one? That's a good question. I would say no, not in those terms. You can say, well, this is, I probably would use the response to this question that I just sort of answered, but here's another factor, right? Here's another story. So you can kind of hedge a little bit and say, look, what you're about to get is not the optimal answer because I kind of gave you the answer before, but you don't do a hard stop like, hey, I just answered that question. I don't know why you're asking, because that's kind of rude too, because if they've asked you a question and you're like, they kind of should be able to perceive that the same question's coming up. And so typically most interviews, the same answer's coming, like they wouldn't ask both of those questions at the same time, right? So yeah, I would tell them that probably, my ideal response would probably be similar to the question you asked me a couple minutes ago, where I said blank, blank, blank. But another example of when I basically resolve a conflict is this. So you need to answer the question. Okay. Any more questions? Oh, oh, wow, they're coming. 26 questions. Okay. Okay. And the walk me through your resume question, should we start with our schooling, college, and then professional experience from start to end? Is it okay to start the opposite, start with the most recent and work your way backwards? I don't think it matters either way. I think it's okay. Most people want the earliest and sort of how did you get to this point. I think that's more the conventional way. If you're going the opposite direction, there better be a reason for it, but you can do it. But just make sure it makes sense, right? Because then it sounds like, well, I did this, and then before that I did this, and then the reason I did that was because before that I did this, and then before, it doesn't typically flow as well, so I probably would go the opposite direction. But if you insist and you feel like there's a compelling reason, it's okay to start from the most recent. Okay. I only have a year of experience. How should I cover it? With care. I mean, now jokes aside, I mean, I think that you should speak about your growth, and hopefully you've been promoted, and hopefully you speak about your reason for why needing to go now, and really emphasize kind of what you're bringing to the table and why you're a great candidate vis-a-vis your peers who may have 2 to 5 years of experience. Is there a specific way to structure your resume? I mean, there are different ways to do it. We offer that service. I mean, that's why we do a webinar on this too, actually. I would say that you probably, if you're 3 years or greater, you probably would put I'm sorry, if you're 4 years or greater, probably put your work experience at the top, and then kind of, most recent, then the least recent, and then put your education at the bottom, and then put your sort of key activities, key extracurriculars below that, and then hobbies. But it really depends. I mean, that's a little bit nuanced, to be honest with you, and I can't tell you exactly to do it over the phone. You could go the opposite direction if you've got less experience and say education first, education section, then work section, and you're always going sort of the LIFO, last in, first out, so you're always doing the most recent of that section at the top and then working your way down. So education, most recent degree, if you have a master's, before that above your undergrad degree, then your work experience, most recent work experience, you go through that, and then basically your extracurriculars or key leadership roles. It depends on kind of what you have, to be honest with you. That's generally how it's structured. All right. Do interviewers ever ask personal questions pertaining to family, marriage, social values, cultural beliefs, etc.? Typically not. They're actually typically coached to not do that specifically, because if you don't get in, they could open the school up for a lawsuit. You didn't get in because you are a liberal or conservative or a Muslim or an atheist, etc. So typically they will not ask you that. If they're trained, they shouldn't ask you that. Okay. Next question. In regards to the interview, what is appropriate to bring? Is it okay to have a notepad for questions? Yeah, totally cool. Bring a notepad, bring a resume. That's probably about it. Don't whip out a laptop at any point in time in the interview, okay? Someone tried to do that and just looked at them and they quickly put it away, but don't do that. But I think, writing some kind of, I would say, writing utensil, a place you can record a notebook, I think is fine. I would not, in this day and age, bring out iPhones. I wouldn't. So if you have questions, I wouldn't pull out my iPhone and go to sort of the notes section and read. That would just be, I wouldn't do that because, it kind of looks weird. It may look like you're texting and you're not really engaged. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful, guys and ladies. Thanks for being here, and jump on and admit me if you have more questions. I'm there. I'll be your first friend, literally. And I hope you guys had it was helpful, and I wish you all the best of luck in your interviews coming up. And if you need help, reach out, especially with interview prep. All right, talk to you guys soon.